This meeting is being recorded.
Hi everyone, my name is Britta Bjornlund. I'm going to give others a couple minutes to join, and then we'll get going. All right, well, welcome everyone. I think we have a number of people here, so we're going to get going. And just wanted to say hello and thank you so much for joining us in this webinar on careers at the U.S. Department of State. And I want to especially thank the National Society of High School Scholars for this opportunity and for their continued partnership. So my name is Britta Bjornlund, and I work at the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, and we call it ECA. We're in Washington, D.C., and my role is I'm the Division Chief for Youth Programs. As the Division Chief for Youth Programs, I oversee a range of exchange programs for American and foreign high school students and young leaders. And these include fully funded study abroad opportunities for American teenagers like yourselves. And I encourage you, if you're interested in possibly studying abroad, to explore our opportunities at exchanges.state.gov/high school. And we'll be talking a little bit about some of these opportunities later. I also invite you and your families to consider hosting an international school exchange student. The Department of State brings extraordinary young people from nearly 60 countries from all over the world to attend American public high schools and live with American families in communities in all 50 states. Right now, we have a push to find great American host families, and we really believe hosting an international student is a wonderful way to bring the world into your home and a great opportunity to build connections and exchange perspectives across cultures. The benefits to hosting is really both for the host family and the exchange student, and you can learn more about these opportunities at hosting.state.gov. Okay, now for a few words about the Department of State. It's the country's oldest cabinet department. It's led by the Secretary of State, and it is responsible for U.S. foreign policy and international affairs. I'm sure a lot of you have studied history, and you know that our first Secretary of State was Thomas Jefferson. He oversaw a small office of something like 4 clerks, a translator, and a messenger. They maintained 2 diplomatic posts, just London and Paris, and 10 consular posts. And now, more than 230 years later, the department includes something like 13,000 members of the Foreign Service, 11,000 civil service employees, and 45,000 locally locally employed staff at more than 270 diplomatic missions worldwide. And we'll talk a little bit about what the difference between the Foreign Service and the Civil Service is a little bit later. So domestically, the Department of State consists of bureaus and offices. Some bureaus handle regional issues, like the Bureau of African Affairs, and some focus on what we call functional topics. An example of that is the bureau where I work, the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. Overseas, the Department of State advances American interests and protects U.S. citizens through embassies located in the capital of a foreign country and consulates which are located in other main cities. And as I said, there are about 270 embassies and consulates in approximately 180 countries around the world. The workforce of the department consists of foreign service, civil service, locally employed overseas staff, political appointees, and contract staff. Civil service personnel usually work domestically in the United States. Many of us work in Washington, D.C. and other main cities around the United States. Foreign service staff usually work overseas, although sometimes they do get posted in Washington, D.C., like our very own Noreen Ali, who you'll hear from in a little bit. Local staff are non-U.S. employees, and they work at U.S. embassies and consulates overseas. The Department of State offers really great opportunities for a meaningful and fulfilling career. I personally love it there, and we look forward to telling you more about these career opportunities. We have a great panel today. Joining me is Noreen Ali. She's a Foreign Service officer currently posted in Washington, D.C. at the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. She actually works in my same division. And John Leake, who is an ECA exchange program alumnus. He's an alumnus of 2 great exchange programs, and he'll tell you about that. He's also a Pickering Fellow, and that means he will join the U.S. Department of State as a Foreign Service officer next fall. So we will each tell you a little bit about our individual paths leading to the State Department, and then we'll open up to questions. I guess I will start, and then I'll let the others talk. How did I get to the State Department? I grew up in Florida. As a kid, I never traveled outside the United States, but my mother liked to invite lots of other people to dinners. We often hosted international guests, and we also twice had exchange students in our home, one from Colombia and one from Japan. And I feel like when I grew up, the world was less interconnected. So to have these exchange students in our home was really sort of unusual. And for me, it really instilled an interest in other countries and other cultures. When I was in high school, I had the opportunity to go away to a boarding school, which I loved. And I thought, this is an unusual school. I should try something different than what would be normally offered in my Florida public school. And so I decided to start taking Russian. And you'll hear me say this probably later, but I really believe in just language learning, whatever language it is. It's just so beneficial in many, many ways. Now, when I was a junior in high school, my boarding school offered a trip at spring break to this. Now you're going to find out how old I am, to the Soviet Union. And I had never been out of the United States. My family didn't have a lot of money, but I asked my parents if I could go. And they said, yes, we will save up for this because we think this sounds like an important trip. So I spent my spring break with my Russian class in the Soviet Union, and it just really changed my view of the world. And I really loved learning about their culture and about their people. So long story short, I went on to major in Russian in college. I went to Williams College in Massachusetts. And I will say that my language learning opened many, many career doors for me. I'm probably the oldest. Well, no, I know I'm the oldest one on this panel. So my career has been longer. Just quickly, and this you can sort of hear how the Russian language has helped me. I worked at an NGO that encouraged democratic development in the Soviet Union, Russia, and Poland. I lived for a year in Kazakhstan working on privatizing a grain elevator. I developed a technical assistance program at the U.S. Department of Agriculture for agricultural economists in Ukraine. I managed exchange program for Russian professionals at the Library of Congress. I led an International Women's Foundation, and I also earlier in there, I received a master's degree from Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies in International Economics. I also authored 4 reference books for middle school on the Cold War and the Russian Revolution. Anyway, all these things. I then found my way to the U.S. Department of State. When I saw this job opening, not the current job that I'm in, but something very similar, it really spoke to me, and I thought, this is really where I want to work. I've been at the Department of State since 2009. I came in right before Secretary Hillary Clinton. So it's been about 13 years, and I really love it. And I will tell you more about that in a little bit. But now over to John to tell us a little bit about his path to where he is now. John.
Hey everyone, it's great to speak with you all here tonight. So I'm John Leake. So my pathway to the State Department, I would say, kind of informally began when I was in high school. So I'm originally from Memphis, Tennessee, and I always really liked learning foreign languages. So I feel like most American high school students, I took Spanish in high school, but I really, really enjoyed it. And I had a really great history teacher as well, who kind of instilled an interest in learning about other cultures and histories of other countries. And so when I was going into my senior year of high school, I just happened to be reading the local newspaper, and I saw that a student from Memphis had won a scholarship from the U.S. Department of State to study Arabic for 6 weeks. And so I did some Googling, and I found a program called the National Security Language Initiative for Youth, which is run by the Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs at the State Department. It's a program that is designed for US high school students to learn critical languages, which basically means languages that aren't taught normally in American high schools. So languages that would include Russian or Arabic, or Mandarin or Hindi, for example. So I chose Russian because I had always had an interest in Russian culture, primarily through my history classes in high school. And so right after I graduated from high school, going into my first year of college, I went to Yaroslavl, Russia, for 6 weeks, where I lived with the host family, and I was taking elementary Russian language classes every day. So I think that experience really opened my eyes to being abroad and what it was like to travel abroad. And it was actually the first time that I learned about the State Department and what the State Department does. And after I returned from Russia, I entered college at New York University. I studied history was my major, and my minor was Russian and Slavic studies. And so I think I probably would not have studied Russian if I had not had that experience with Nestle. So I would say that in college, my path was maybe very circuitous. Like I knew about the Foreign Service, but I had really loved history and was sort of considering maybe going into academia. But then as I was graduating my senior year of college, there was a State Department recruiter who was a Foreign Service officer that gave a really compelling talk about the work of US diplomats overseas, and that kind of sparked my interest. And then after I graduated from college, I did what's called a Fulbright scholarship, in Russia as well, and that's also sponsored by the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. And I was in a city called Kazan, where I was teaching English to Russian university students. And that experience, combined with being able to meet diplomats that were serving in Russia, at the time really sparked my interest and solidified my interest in potentially wanting to pursue a foreign service career one day. So this past summer, I interned at the Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs at the State Department in the Youth Programs Division. So we were working on programs geared towards youth ages like 15 to 24. And I did this internship through what's called the Thomas R. Pickering Foreign Affairs Fellowship. So after I returned from my second time in Russia on my Fulbright, I was applying to graduate school and fellowships. So the Thomas R. Pickering Fellowship is one of 3 flagship fellowships at the State Department that are designed to increase diversity within the US Foreign Service. In addition to the Pickering, there's the Charles B. Rangel International Affairs Fellowship, and there's also the Donald M. Payne International Development Fellowship. So these programs, in a nutshell, provide a fast track into the Foreign Service with the added benefit of helping you pay for graduate school. So currently I'm doing my master's in Russian area studies at Harvard University. And I will be joining the department after I graduate, and there's a 5-year service commitment, but I hope to stay for my entire career. So that's me in a nutshell. So if you have any questions about college, internships, fellowships, I can answer those questions.
Thank you, John.
Sorry, go ahead, Noreen, over to you.
Thank you, Britta. So I'm Noreen Ali, as Britta mentioned, and I am a Foreign Service officer. And as Britta explained, that means I'm based for the majority of my career overseas. We do complete some tours domestically. It's a good way to get back in touch with the department, get back in touch with your own country, because the US culture and mindset does change over time. And sometimes it's really important for us to come back, get immersed back into it, and then go overseas knowing that we are representing our country, not just officially the policies, but also what our country is and what our culture is experiencing at this time. It makes it a lot easier. I think there's sometimes a tendency from some foreign service officers to spend all of their career overseas, which financially does make a lot of sense for us, but also it tends to sometimes make them romanticize certain things about the US. And I often think it's good to get that reality check and to know that democracy is a work in progress and that we in the US are constantly working on it. And sometimes that's helpful when I talk to people who are working to sometimes create democracy or establish it in their own countries, or just as we are trying to make sure that the ideals of democracy always continue. So we do the bulk of our career overseas, and I'll talk a bit about my path to it. So I grew up in Pakistan. I was born in the US, but my parents were students in the United States, and they actually met here and they got married in California, and they had both of their girls here. And my father decided he did not want to be a brain drain. He felt he learned a lot coming to study in the US, and he wanted to take it back to his country and contribute. And so he did that. We lived there for 15 years. We lived in Karachi and Lahore, and we stayed in close contact with the US consulates there because I had an aunt who was a warden, but we used to go to US consulate parties, and we remained in contact. And I grew up going to events there and thought, this is an interesting career. I wouldn't mind doing this one day. And so it was on my radar, but I didn't know what was involved in it. And I was also very much a home person. So my family, I thought I would never do something that would have me going around the world. I went to college in Berkeley, and a college recruiter also interested me in the Foreign Service. And I also was recruited by Peace Corps, and I ended up joining the Peace Corps because I did fail the Foreign Service test the first time when I was in college. And I want to encourage anyone who's thinking about it. It can take multiple attempts to get in, and that's okay. It's, I think, honestly, the times that I failed because I failed twice. I think that was a good thing. And I think it helped me because in a weird way, the test, I think, could tell I wasn't ready and did accept me at a time when I was ready to get in. So I went to undergraduate. I went to do my Peace Corps service in Jordan, and I came back. And at that time, during my Peace Corps service, because you do get to meet people from the embassy or consulate in the country you go to quite a bit. And so the acting or the charge d'affaires or the acting ambassador at the time, who became the ambassador, was David Hale. And I remember he was talking to me about it, and he told me, you can study what you want. And so he really was pushing me to do law school and grad school because I couldn't decide between the two of them. And so he pushed me because he did the dual degree. He said, you should do the dual degree. I did it, and I was about $250,000 in debt. So I finished law school and grad school, and during my school, I took the Foreign Service test for the second time. My brain was fried. Doing both those degrees at the same time is exhausting, especially the last year when you have to finish all of your degree credits for 2 degrees simultaneously. Was not the best time to take the Foreign Service test. So I didn't pass it that time. I did, however, start working in legal aid as an advocate for victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, and fell in love with the work. It's kind of one of those jobs where you feel very righteous. You're fighting the good fight. There's no sympathy for the other side. So you really do feel very passionately about what you're doing. And so I took the Foreign Service test for the third time when I was happy with my job, but also I knew that wasn't what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And that was a perfect time to take it. I got in then. I still deferred my entrance for a couple of years to make sure I could get some trial experience, because I thought, I don't know if the Foreign Service is completely the right fit for me. I want to have a backup plan. And so I did go into it. I did end up joining about year 3. And so that was 2013. And so I've been in about 9 years. It'll be 9 years next week, actually. And I did 2 consular tours, which is when you go and work in the visa or the passport section. And to me, it's the best entry level work because you really do get to know the people, because you're talking to about 100 people every day. I did 2 tours of that in India and in Mexico. And then I got to do what is my actual cone. And just to explain, for a Foreign Service officer, we have 5 cones. There's management, which does the internal workings of the embassy, the facilities, making sure people get paid, which is very important, hiring, all of those things. And then you've got political, which does the, policy stuff and talks to the political leaders and really is pushing US foreign policy and guiding sort of the other sections of the embassy to make sure everybody's doing that. Then you've got economics, which is doing trade stuff, public diplomacy, which is my cone, which I think is the best. And that's where you're doing a lot of the exchange work, also the press work, cultural inter exchanges between the peoples. And then there is, consular, which is the visas, the passports. And really the reason we have embassies is consular, because it's to take care of American citizens overseas. So I did 2 tours in India and Mexico, and then my 3rd tour was in Trinidad and Tobago. And I basically got to do all the public diplomacy work because we were very short-staffed because it was during COVID. And I'm really glad I chose that as my cone. And then I decided to come back home for my 4th tour. And this is the hard part of the Foreign Service. You're far from family. So you do not have, your parents, siblings around you a lot of the time. You celebrate a lot of birthdays alone, other special occasions alone. And with COVID, I was in a country with closed borders. And so I was like, nope, next time I'm going home. I'm going to be within the same international borders as my parents. And my dad was going through some health stuff, which also made that important. And so it all worked out. I chose to come here, and that's my path in. So I think that's it for me, Britta.
Great, thank you. So I encourage all of you to put some questions in the Q&A box, and we're going to sort of take turns trying to answer them. And if we run out of questions, I have some questions up my sleeve, but I see there's a few here. So I'll go ahead and start. Rebecca was brave enough to put in the first question, at least the first one I saw, which is, how can this program help a high school student in biomed? Are there opportunities in the medical field? It's kind of a specific question, but many of you might be thinking similar kinds of questions. I will say that, so the Department of State has these wonderful opportunities for study abroad for high school students. I'm going to assume that's what she's referring to. We have the NISLY program that John talked about, the National Security Language Initiative for Youth. We have a program called Yes Abroad. We have a program called Flex Abroad. We have youth ambassadors, and we have, I'm forgetting one. Maybe that's it. Oh, I'm forgetting CDYX, our Congress Bundestag Youth Exchange, which sends young people to Germany. So these programs are sort of cultural immersion or language and cultural immersion. You would go to a country such as Indonesia or Jordan or Korea and live with a host family, stay there. For the most part, many of them are, 10 months or an academic year, live with the host family, attend a public school, perhaps take language classes if you are in a NISLY program. And certainly there might be some sciences or some medical or some biology in those schools, but our programs don't sort of focus on that specifically. Now, we do have inbound programs as well, including a program called Tech Girls. And Tech Girls brings something like 135 girls who are interested in STEM field from around the world to the United States in the summer for a 3-week sort of deep dive into tech questions. And we do encourage Americans and accept Americans to that program as well. So that might be something you would want to look into, Tech Girls. Okay, I'm going to stop there and pass it over to John to answer a question.
So I see a question here from Emma. So she says, this year I'm going to be a senior in high school and I've already started writing applications to college. Congratulations. I am very interested in working at an overseas embassy. So what are some good majors to study to be best qualified? So I would personally say study what you want and study what you're passionate about. I don't think that there's one particular major or minor that's going to be a golden ticket to get an internship at the department or to join or to have a career with the department. I think if you study what you're passionate about, then that passion will come through. So I was a history major because I really loved history. And I would also say that if you like foreign languages, that can also be a really good way. Everyone in the State Department learns a foreign language at one point. A lot of people speak multiple languages. So if you do like languages, I would recommend maybe taking foreign languages. But at the end, study what you want, because I think that any academic field can generally has some type of home within the State Department.
Thank you. The questions are now flooding in. So you have a lot of foreign service and youth ambassador type questions to choose from, Noreen.
I know I do, and I was actually debating which one should I answer, but I'm going to start with youth ambassadors. And I did forget to mention in my intro that I am the program officer for Jóvenes en Acción, which is a program for Mexican high school students who come to the US, and Youth Ambassadors, which is one of the programs where we both bring people in and we send American high school students out to 6 countries in Central and South America. Some of them are Spanish language and some of them aren't. And so you have your choice. If you want to work on Spanish language, and I did get a question, what is the best way to study languages? And I'm going to say, honestly, immersion. Getting yourself into an environment where all you speak and hear is the language you want to learn is important, is phenomenal for learning it. And that's why a program like Youth Ambassadors is great, because you can immerse yourself, and it's about 3 weeks, so it's kind of a summer program. You have to have at least 1 semester of high school left, and you have to be 14 to 17 years old. And basically for 3 weeks, you go to a country and you focus on building your leadership skills in civic engagement and community service. And then when you return from your 3-week exchange program, you have to implement a community service project. And so, you know, we send you with mentors who help you along the way, but it's a great exchange program, and you can learn more at youthambassadors.worldlearning.org. I encourage you to do that, but it's a phenomenal program, but all of them are. So the Youth Ambassadors is one of our summer programs. Then you've got CBYX and YES, which are whole academic year programs. And then you have Nestle Y, which is also both of them. It can either be a summer program or a full year program. So you have a lot of options, but Youth Ambassadors, I'm totally biased, but it is the best. No, they're all good. I'm kidding.
Great, thank you. Let's see, I see a lot of questions about what to study, and we've sort of answered those. I see a lot of questions about, hold on a second, internships. Internships, remote internships. So I, as a hiring manager at the U.S. Department of State for the last 13 years, I think every summer I've had at least 1, sometimes up to 3 interns working in my specific office. The State Department has a fantastic internship program. We used to require our general interns to come and work free of charge, but that has changed. So that's really a wonderful change. And you can find more about internships at careers.state.gov. I think Petya will put that in the chat. And I would say, to answer a few of the questions here, you can do an internship in high school. Interns can be in high school, they can be in college, they can be in graduate school. John can speak a little bit more about the very specific fellowship that he did that allowed him to intern in our youth programs division. We also have something called, and someone has asked about this, a virtual internship. So you wouldn't need to come to Washington, D.C. for the summer. You can intern where you are. And it's not just summer. We have interns in the fall, we have interns in the spring, we have interns in the winter. So it's a really, really a great program and gives you a feel for the kind of work that we do and if it's really something you do want to pursue a career in. I will say for the summer, you probably need to start applying in early fall. So you have to, sort of think about this a little bit in advance. I'll pause there and over to John.
So I see a question about college. So one participant says that he observed that we all went to prestigious universities. As a high school student, is it important for me to plan to attend a highly respected program to enter the State Department? So I would say no. I think the State Department, and in particular the Foreign Service, prides itself on having quite an objective process in which to enter. The department historically has been what's called pale male in Yale, and they are actively trying to recruit potential employees from all backgrounds and walks of life. So I don't think that the university that you attend really matters. I think what matters is what you do at that university, and how you can convey your interest and your passions to the department.
That's a good answer. And just to add to that, because I see a lot of other ones that go specifically into the Foreign Service, my entry class was, there tend to be a lot of lawyers, but even that is, I think, 7 to 10% of each incoming class. I had engineers coming in with me. I had military people. You don't actually even need an undergraduate degree. So people from different backgrounds, lots of years in law enforcement, for instance, things like that. So that was just adding to John's question, but I will really quickly answer one that I thought was kind of an interesting question, which is how does domestic policy impact your work? Well, so obviously when you're in the State Department, you are carrying out foreign policy that is made domestically. So when it comes to the domestic politics in terms of how we support foreign assistance, specifically assistance with certain countries, that will be the work you carry out. But if you're talking about specifically things that are impacting internally, they do impact us. And in a lot of ways, you'll have to answer for that. You, with your contacts, you're the only American they know. So when they don't understand why we do certain things or why certain things happen, they will ask you about that. And you have to try and explain it to people. And one of the things I do tell people who do foreign exchanges is that something will happen while you're there that you're going to have to explain to people, especially if you're there for an entire academic year. It is difficult sometimes, and you do that whenever you go overseas. As a Peace Corps volunteer, my first week in the Middle East, well, it wasn't my first week there, but it was my first week leaving our training, which we did together with host families, and going out to work in a school in a remote village. My first week was the week that the pictures from Abu Ghraib went out, and I had people in my staff room, because I was working as a teacher, who came to me and said, why is your country doing this to people, to our people? And it's something you have to answer, and you have to respectfully answer in a way that acknowledges that there is sometimes a hurt that is happening there. And you have to stand for the values that your country is, and say, you can't, as a Peace Corps volunteer, I could say whatever I wanted, but as a diplomat, what I would say is, no, we completely stand against this, and there will, we will take action against this. But it's also things that happen, like school shootings, and I have to explain them when I'm overseas. Or January 6th, I was overseas and I had a contact call me on the phone and say, what is happening to your country? Is democracy dying in the United States? And you know what? The next day he called me and he said, I saw your very old politicians certify the election results after everything that happened. They went back to work and they certified their election results. And that saved the idea of democracy for me, that they did that. And so it's good and it's bad, but it does have an impact. And as an American serving overseas, you're serving your country, you represent your country, and you have to be that face of your country, both in good times and bad times. And you have to explain to people that, as I said, democracy is a work in progress, and we're working on it, and some days are easier than others. So that's a very long answer, but it is difficult sometimes.
That's great. Thanks, Noreen. So I see a couple of questions asking about, do you have to learn a foreign language? And another one says, do you have to learn a foreign language to be in the foreign consulate? It's really more of a question for Noreen because she's in the Foreign Service, but I will say for our programs that I just talked about, you do not need to know a foreign language. Even for the NISLY-Y, which is a language learning program, you do not have to have any background in the language, but some kids do. And I know Noreen's answer for the Foreign Service. If you are going to go and be stationed in Korea, for example, you don't need to learn Korean. Well, so you do, but you don't need to already know Korean in order to represent the U.S. at the embassy in Seoul. the State Department will actually put you through sort of language training until you're ready to go. So it's a great benefit because you can head to Indonesia and then learn Indonesian, and it's all, you know, paid for by the State Department. So it's a great, great benefit of being in the Foreign Service. I hope I answered that well, Noreen. Over to you, John.
So I saw a great question. So outside of the Peace Corps, what are good opportunities for work and experience while waiting for acceptance into the Foreign Service? So one of the best pieces of advice that I ever heard about getting through the process of entering the Foreign Service was from a State Department recruiter. She said that because the process is, it may take multiple attempts to get through the process, that you should essentially live your life while gaining international experience or professional experience. So you could do things like the Peace Corps, you could do a Fulbright, for instance, you could work at a nonprofit, at an NGO. These are all things that are going to build your professional portfolio and give you the professional experience that you need to get through the process. One thing that she also said was be informed. So read the newspaper every day, listen to news podcasts, read journals like Foreign Affairs or The Economist, because the process is cumulative. You're building all this knowledge over the years. And eventually when you go through the process, maybe your first time, maybe your third or fourth time, you are constantly building that knowledge and those skills and that experience. So that was some of the best advice that I ever got. So what to do while you're waiting around for the Foreign Service? Basically, whatever you want to do, as long as you're building professional skills.
Yep, that is true. It is nice that there are many paths. It's one of the unique things about the United States Foreign Service is that a lot of other countries, it's kind of a professional thing where you have to have a certain degree and then you come in and you know, it's differently done. But in the US Foreign Service, you can come in from a lot of different backgrounds as long as you pass that entry test. And you can do, there are people, I think the average age is, I want to say it's about 27 or 30. It's so people come in, a lot of people are second careers, but not all. Some people come in straight from college to grad school to Foreign Service. And I see a question about what the first few days of leaving your family is like. And so that's a great question. To be honest, I did my first few days without my family in Peace Corps. And it was hard. I think the first few days of leaving my family in college was probably the hardest because that was the first time I was away really from home. But then Peace Corps was my first time doing it completely in a different country. And then Foreign Service, I actually, weirdly enough, did not ever go to a new country without seeing my family. My mother came when I went to India, my mother came and joined me there because she had been at my grandmother's funeral in Pakistan. And so she came a few hours after I got there. And then my parents went with me both to Mexico and to Trinidad and Tobago to help me because I was transporting 2 cats. And it is easier if you are more people than cats flying because you can carry them in the cabin with you. So my parents would fly with me. And so honestly, it was actually, I think in some ways it would have been better had I gone on my own because then you're so caught up in the excitement of a new place and then but it is helpful to have people with you, but then they leave and all of a sudden you're alone and you don't even have that whole new place because you've been there about 2 or 3 weeks. So you don't even have that excitement anymore. And it is difficult the first couple of days in any case. But at the same time, it's exciting and you're experiencing so many new things that it's really important to keep it in perspective and to not get lost in the fact that you're without those people. Most programs will give you an orientation. In fact, I think all of our programs do. So you get a chance to bond with the people in your group and you become each other's support network. So this is if you're doing an internship, but foreign service is kind of the same. We assign people a social sponsor when you get to a new country. So they kind of set up your kitchen and they organize like a meal for you where you get to meet other people. And then you have an office sponsor who helps, set up your first day of appointments. So we try to create support networks, both in our programs and in the foreign service. And that helps a lot with it. But also I think it's a really great experience because there's a lot of things that, during COVID, I know a lot of my friends who got isolated for the first time felt very, very insecure in a way that I just didn't, because I had gotten used to a certain level of isolation before that from people I loved. So it is hard, but it is something that you also teaches you a certain level of independence, which is good. And what is harder is missing, like when my dad got sick and not being able to come home. That's what's really difficult for me in this career. It's not the going to a new place and being on my own. It's when something happens, needing a few days to get home. And that's something that you constantly, as a foreign service officer, I know it's something we all struggle with, especially as we get older. And that's something you've got to really think about is, if something happens, who will tell me? How will they tell me? I gave all my family members the emergency number to call so I can be informed overseas, and my boss's number and things like that. So it is something you have to balance if you're going to join the foreign service. Can I manage to, how easy will it be for me to be far away when things happen? And that is a constant struggle.
Thanks, Noreen. That's one of the reasons I never joined the Foreign Service. I didn't want to be too far away from my family. And I know that's hard. So there's a lot of questions like this one, and so I'll go ahead and answer this. What are the usual majors for those who work at the Department of State? Is it always Foreign Service? And what are the domestic jobs? So speaking as a civil servant, which means I'm based in the United States, I have one job and I keep that job unless I see another job that I want to apply for. We have all kinds of people working in the Department of State. As I said, we have these regional bureaus. My example was the Bureau of African Affairs. You could be a specialist in Africa. You could come in with a major in a language. We have these thematic bureaus our bureau is on educational and cultural affairs. So many people who we work with every day majored in international education or international affairs. But we have lawyers who work at the department. We have doctors, we have scientists, we have drivers, really all kinds of people in all kinds of fields. And I will also just mention that the Department of State, both in the civil service and the foreign service, really has a commitment and a new commitment to really diversify, to be more inclusive, and to really attract a wider range of different kinds of people. So some of you said, oh, I see that you all went to very elite colleges. That may be true, but I think that is changing, and we're looking for all kinds of different people to come and make us more diverse and therefore better and stronger. So I encourage all of you to think about this. Over to you, John.
So I saw two really good questions. Okay, so the first one was about when to start looking at potential internship opportunities at the State Department as a college student. So I will say that there are a lot of internship opportunities at the State Department and a lot of fellowships at the State Department. So it really depends on what type of experience that you're looking for. And I would say also that, in full disclosure, I applied for an internship at the State Department when I was a sophomore in college, and I did not get it. But I think that this is a career path that rewards determination. So a lot of times you may not get something on your first try, but you may get it on your second or your third try, for instance. And I also think this is a good opportunity for me to explain a little bit more about the fellowship opportunities at the department. So as I said, I'm what's called a Thomas R. Pickering Foreign Affairs Fellow. So it's one of many fellowships that are designed to increase diversity in the US Foreign Service, diversity being a broad term that can mean racial diversity, ethnic diversity, gender diversity, but also economic diversity and geographic diversity as well. So for those of you that are in college right now, and if you are interested in a foreign service career, you can apply during your senior year of college, but you can also apply anytime after you finish college, so long as you don't have a master's degree. So essentially, how it works is once you apply, then there is a finalist stage where you they will inform you whether or not you're selected for an interview. Traditionally, you have an interview in Washington, D.C. over 2 to 3 days. My year, it was virtual because of COVID. And then essentially, you complete your first year of graduate school. And then after your first year of graduate school, you do an internship domestically at the State Department headquarters in DC. And then you do your second year of grad school. And then after your second year of grad school, you do an internship at a US embassy or consulate overseas. And then you enter the Foreign Service 5 to 6 months after that. I will say that the fellowship is really competitive. And again, back to the point of determination, a lot of people apply to the fellowships 2 or 3 times before they get it. And so again, don't be discouraged if you don't get something on your first try. Just keep trying, keep building that experience, keep staying informed. And there was a second question that I thought was really great. It was about how much it costs to go on youth exchange programs with the Department of State. So I can answer my experience, and then I'll probably turn it over to Noreen and Britta to answer in more detail. But when I did the NISLE Y program in high school, it was completely funded. So they paid for our flight to our orientation in DC from my home city. They paid for our international airfare. Everything was covered by the program while we were in Russia. And the only thing that I think I had to pay for was fees for getting a passport and then fees for doing a medical examination. So they're completely free, which is why I encourage everyone to apply. And if Noreen or Britta want to answer in more detail.
No, I should have mentioned that, and I actually did answer it, and I typed in the answer. All of the programs that we talked about, the State Department Youth Exchange programs, they're all fully funded, so they are free. John is exactly right.
Yes, I would say that not just free, but the internship, as Britta and John mentioned, you can actually get paid for it. So there's even that benefit there. I know there's a few questions about requirements and we're almost out of time, so I'm going to try and go through them really quickly. So to join the Foreign Service, you actually do not need a bachelor's degree. If you're going to go the internship route, then yes, you do, because you're getting grad school. And the State Department does count towards public loan student loan forgiveness. So I mentioned I graduated with $250,000 in loan, which of course with interest went up, but I was able to pay income-based repayment, which means you're paid based on your income. So it was an affordable monthly payment. And then after 10 years, I got my loans forgiven. So yay. As of last year, I think it was December last year or November, I became completely student loan free, which was amazing. So that helped as well. And then I saw a vaccine mandate question. I think that was for the internships. So the State Department does not have a vaccine requirement. However, some of the program implementers do. So when you look at the program requirements, please check that. Because for instance, youth ambassadors, it's not a State Department requirement, but our implementing partner has that requirement for the health and safety of their staff. And therefore, and as well, because some countries you travel to have vaccine mandates, and that also causes an issue, because if the country you're going to has one, then you can't actually do a program there if you don't have a vaccination, and we can't get an exception to other countries' laws. So do check that program by program requirement. And I did see one other quick one that I was going to do. Oh, so to travel to another country, you do need a passport. So if you would need to be able to have a US passport to join the State Department. But if you're going to participate in, I do believe for all of them, you have to be a US citizen and resident, right, Britta? Yes. So that is a requirement for it. And dual citizens are able to go on the internships. But if you're joining the State Department, while you are not precluded by being a dual citizen, sometimes you are required to give up that secondary citizenship, especially if you're going to work in that country, because then there becomes a whole issue of who has jurisdiction over you. So you can't get diplomatic immunity if you're a citizen of the country you're in. So for example, when I go overseas, in some countries, I do get diplomatic immunity if I'm going to work there as a diplomat, but I don't get diplomatic immunity in the US because I'm a US citizen. So if you're going to go as a dual citizen of, let's say, if I were US and Pakistan, I've never had Pakistani citizenship, but if I were a dual citizen and I went to Pakistan, one, they would not consider me a diplomat because it'd be like, you can't be a diplomat in your own country. And two, they would give me some issues with immunity. So that's why often if you're, if you can't serve in certain countries as a citizen of a non-US country. So dual citizenship can be an issue.
We have 3 minutes left. And so I'm going to ask all of us to answer the last question. And we're gonna have to be really quick because we only have 3 minutes and I want people to be able to go on and enjoy their evenings. So both of you talked about a little bit about failure, which is so fantastic because I think people are so scared to fail, and it's so important to be okay to fail and take those lessons and look at both of you and where you were able to go after that. But my question is, so in your experience, what has been the most satisfying or challenging or unexpected aspect of working in the State Department? Now we only have 2 minutes. So my answer is, as you heard, I'm a Russian speaker and I've done a lot of work in Soviet Union, Russia, Poland, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, those types of places. Well, working in the State Department at one point during the Obama administration, my bosses came to me and said, can you create a program for Africa? And I'd never been to Africa. I didn't know anything about Africa, but I knew something about creating a program because I had a lot of experience in that. And so I worked with colleagues in the Africa Bureau who have that expertise and others to craft this large program that brought African professionals to the United States. We worked with President Obama. We brought like 1,000 people every year. It's still going. It was fantastically exciting to learn about a new place. I traveled to Africa. So it's, you don't necessarily, just do one thing. There's opportunities to learn and to grow and to try new things. Okay, over to John and Noreen. Challenging or unexpected?
John, do you want me to answer that first? You look like you're struggling. Okay. So for me, the most challenging aspect has, so one of the things I talked about is like the isolation. And as much as I am an introvert, which is a very weird thing for a public diplomacy officer to say, I totally am. And I need my one day alone to recharge. That said, the most challenging thing is the isolation, and especially being single, and there's certain things with the department that are still set up for a family where you're a man, it's the officer, and you have a stay-at-home wife who will take care of all of the other issues with settling and all of those things. And that is why I helped found and I chair an employee organization that advocates for singles in the State Department. And we really try and fight that because I hate complaining without actually working on a solution. So I think, like all things that Britta mentioned about diversity, the State Department is working on it, and they've made some really interesting inroads that are really focused on targeting that. But you have to advocate for yourself and for others. And so that is how I get past that challenge, is trying to advocate for singles in the State Department.
John, you only have 15 seconds, and you can answer on challenging or satisfying. So
I will say, like, on the diversity note that Noreen was talking about, I think this summer, so I was interning in Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, and I was able to work on a project to make a resource guide for students of color who go on youth exchange programs at the department, to give them some advice about some challenges that students of color may face overseas. And I think that seeing my office's response, positive response to that project, really shows that the State Department is really trying to diversify. So I'm excited for that and to see that and where that goes in my career. So,
and of course, that is true for our exchange programs as well. Thank you everyone for joining us. The links are in the chat, but the big ones are careers.state.gov and then exchanges.state.gov/high school. And thank you so much. We really enjoyed it. Thank you, John. Thank you, Noreen.
Thank you, everyone.